like an incentive to get them to do the behavior you're trying to teach them, kind of like a reward, but not exactly a reward. So based on, it'll always be based on that specific student, but because we're a very big class, what we're going to do today as an example of that is, because it's lunchtime, y'all incentivize with food and candy. So what we're going to do is, for our reward for our warm-up, as well as whenever an answer is given that's the behavior we're trying to enforce, you are going to be given a Jolly Rancher. Sound good? So when you have a student with EBD, you will likely be doing the same thing. Not that it is candy. It could be extra recess time. It could be
stickers.
Yeah.
Time in the library area where they can read where they want to.
Okay. So the first part of this is called spoons. What I'm going to ask you to do is split evenly. We're going to have two different groups.
Sierra and Abby, you guys will go this way, and then everybody else will go to that side.
We're going to need one person to have something to write on. I have a piece of paper for each of you, and I also have pens if you'd like them. You're going to split into two even groups. You're going to be at the end, so you do have to get up. I know I'm asking you, I said to move. It's about that time of the day you want to relax. We're going to have one group up here and one group up there. There are not tables, so you do need something to lean on. If you'd like a piece of paper, can you get that other piece of paper, please? So the goal of this exercise is, when I show the category, you're going to quickly try and write 5 words that go alongside that category. After you write those 5 words, and they have to be on the paper before you leave, no writing it as they're walking away, the person that you choose is going to run down here, try and get this spoon from the floor. When you get the spoon, I know y'all are like, I don't want to run. When you get the spoon, we will come check your answers, and if all 5 of your words fit the category, that is when you get the reward of the candy.
And so that it is fair, can everybody be 3 chairs, 3 rows?
They will all be getting candy?
Everyone, every person in each group. So if this group wins, they will all get a piece of candy. If this group wins, they will each get a candy.
So is the person who's writing also the person who's writing?
No.
Yes. You want it to be like a team effort.
And it won't be the same people writing each time. It won't be the same people running each time. It'll switch around as we go. We got a couple categories. Are there any questions, concerns, angry comments about this warm-up activity? Taking that as a no.
Okay. Here's your categories. Yes.
So just the first activity, the first category is emotions. Write down 5 emotions on your sheet. When you have all 5 written down, you're going to come run up here to get a spoon. Do not start on the other categories yet.
Run.
Run.
Very good.
Do I pick up the spoon?
Okay.
So she wrote sad, angry, hungry,
Disgust.
fear, and joy.
That is correct. So you guys are going to get some
Thank you. Yeah.
Angry. Don't start writing anything yet until they have had their candy and Kenley has had her chance to get back.
This is called using ABA technique.
Alright.
So the next category is actions when angry.
Are we ready? Ready, set, go!
Okay, so
It might be the other side.
hit, yell, bite, and punch. Very good.
This is a simple activity you can do with your students. It's always going to be individualized. You want to find out what they are incentivized
I like
by.
banana pie.
Not everybody likes candy, not everyone likes extra recess,
So
they
many.
need stickers.
I love the like artificial banana flavor.
Okay, the next category is actions when scared.
Are we ready?
Set, go. So shaking, quiet, screaming, crying, and hiding. Okay, good. You guys can
You know what? When you are talking about action with scared, they are already working on the second one action will happen, and then they will win because they know that's coming next.
Yeah, when presentation mode, it has it set up so you can't see the difference.
Did anybody else do the attendance?
I did.
You all attended.
Okay. All right, last one. Remember, no cheating. We're going with the honor system here.
And the final one is actions when somebody is happy.
Maria.
Are you ready? I'm not writing nothing. Go!
No, do us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alright.
She wrote hug, smile, laugh, crying,
I'm glad I got to see
Here's her pen bag. Thank you.
I don't know where this disrespectful allergy came from. You want a piece of this pot? Prepare the foot. Keys to second position. Ready to your command, sir. Fire! That's it. Go to your room.
It's on the floor. You can have this.
She did not just say that.
Okay, so some prior knowledge, emotional behavioral disorders. The federal definition under IDEA uses the term emotional disturbances to describe those with emotional and behavioral disorders. Emotional disturbance is condition exhibiting at least one of the following over a long period of time to a degree that adversely affects a child's educational performance. Inability to learn, not explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors. Inability to build or maintain interpersonal relationships with peers or teachers. And so,
Are you going to record?
yeah, we have
Oh,
it.
yeah. It's recording. So another one that we have found is from the Council for Children with Behavioral Disorders. This definition is different because it changes the term emotionally disturbed to emotional and behavioral disorders, which, as we were discussing in class, is a pretty big deal. It makes it a lot more comfortable for those who have this diagnosis. The disability is that is characterized by behavioral or emotional responses in school that are so different from appropriate age, cultural, and ethnic norms that the responses adversely affect educational performance, including academic, social, vocational, and personal skills. These include more than a temporary expected response to stressful events in the environment, consistently exhibited in two different settings. One is school, where like one is school and another is home or somewhere else, like with a family member. And unresponsive to direct intervention applied in general education, or the condition means general education interventions would be insufficient.
Okay, so our first question is, why is there no universally accepted definition of emotional or behavioral disorders? So if you want to take a minute, you can discuss with your partner and then we'll come back.
I forgot to mention that one. I think we should just. Is that okay with them? Yeah, go ahead. Because I think if I throw it on, it's not. I got you. And you can call when you're ready. Yes, ma'am.
Remember name first and then answer.
Maria Firuso. So I think there's no universally accepted definition of emotional or behavioral disorder, because people vary so much that it would be super hard to have one definition for it when people will have different responses and stuff. And yeah, that's all I got.
Very good. Yes, ma'am.
I feel like it's also just, Alexa, Parker. I feel like it's also just something that's still being figured out, because, like, I don't know, like, how Dr. Khan was saying, like, back in our grandparents' day, I can't multitask. Like, back in our grandparents' day, like, emotions weren't really a thing, and, like, being a girl back then, you just had to be, like, very prim and proper and, like, fit to the standards that were set up for you. And it's finally, like, we're finally now, like, as women, like, allowed to, like, say what we want to and do what we want to. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it's just still being figured out, emotions and all that.
Did you have one as well?
I was just gonna say, because it's so different for everybody, and you know, just because like this child cries, you know, easily over something, doesn't necessarily mean that they have a disorder. It just could mean, I mean, they are a little bit more sensitive to something. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a disorder, and I think it's just because it varies so, like, the variety is so wide. It's not so different.
I think a part of it can also be based on the society of the area. Like, if you aren't allowed to show emotion because it's not socially acceptable, then it'd be hard to practice.
Student, please name first, because they have to write. They have to write.
Okay. Yes.
Katie, so I was going to say that I think there's so many different like conditions that have to fit inside of emotional behavior disorder that like you can't put all of those things in one box and have like a valid definition for it.
I'm Abby. Another issue would be is how students respond to those emotions that they have, and so just because a student responds in a certain way does not mean it necessarily fits the emotion that you're thinking, and so defining what they're feeling is really hard, especially if they're young and don't know how to use words to fit that.
Yeah, Haley. I was thinking like everybody reacts differently to things. Like I know like in certain situations, but in certain situations like I'm awkward at like hospitals and funerals, and it's not. And you know like sometimes you laugh in awkward situations, or sometimes like when you're really angry, instead of like lashing out or yelling, you end up crying. So it's really different for each person. So you can't really have one set way to react, I guess.
Very good, very good. Yes.
Maria, just to go off of what Alexa just said, with like the whole like our grandparents that like didn't believe in this stuff. I mean that's still true today. Like there are people out there who believe that depression and anxiety and other emotional disorders are myths, that they're not real, that they aren't happening, that people just need to get over it. And so I think that's also a big reason why we can't come to, like, it's not even universally accepted that these are actually things that happen in people's brains, you know? Yeah.
Okay. Did anyone else have a comment they'd like to share? So our answer is that disagreements among professionals stem from many factors, including a diversity of theoretical models, humanistic and behavioral. the fact that all children and youth behave inappropriately at different times and in different situations, and the difficulty of measuring emotions and behavior, as well as the variance across cultures in terms of what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior. Similarly, the terms we use to describe this population are many and diverse, behaviorally disordered, personally impaired, socially impaired, and many more. And the personal lenses of behavior as different cultures have different variations of the normal. It also, I want to point out, so we all wrote all these different things like actions when angry, actions when sad. There's no way to dictate that every single person is going to act that way. Even though that's what we typically think or think's going to happen, you don't know exactly how every person's going to act. It's kind of like your emotions are a snowflake. You never know what it's going to look like when you get hit with them. Okay. So our next question is, some students may not qualify for special education and related services. As you will see in the classroom, what are some modifications that can be done for these students to keep them out of their frustration levels?
Yes, Tana.
Oh, well, Tana, and some could be like a little quiet corner, like if the student's like starting to like freak out, whether it's like with sadness or anger, they can like go to this little corner, and there can be like comforts in this corner, like a little beanbag chair or something. They can just like take a second to cool off. They can let them go out in the hallway and get some water, and they can just like let them have a minute to themselves to collect themselves, and then they can come back.
Carly, where I work at, there are some kids in the 3rd grade that get frustrated so quickly, and they're like little notes just taped on their desk, and the teacher will just go by and just like tap them, and you'll just see the kids like take a deep breath, and like, even though it's so silly because all it is a piece of paper, to them it's just like a time for them to like relax.
Yes.
Harley, like the way I've seen it done in some classrooms and the way I've done it in like my preschool classroom is like the teachers, we kind of like model out like, why are we feeling this? What is this emotion? And then like, well, how can we better fix this situation for next time? Or like, how can we better handle this situation next time? Like, if a student's kicking or hitting someone, then we can talk about like, well, why'd you do that? Instead of doing that next time, let's try talking it out with them. Say, I don't like the way you talk to me. Can you not talk like that? Or can you not call me names? Stuff like that.
Exactly. Yes, Haley?
Haley. I think it's like similar to when students like have trouble like focusing. A lot of times teachers will give them something, or like when they're fidgeting, they'll give them something to work with that. So like when it comes to frustration levels, I've seen where a lot of teachers will give them like silent, calm down toys or whatever, and it'll be like a water bottle with all these different things in it, and you can just flip it, and it's quiet, and it's not super distracting, but it kind of just gets them to focus on something and calm down and stop thinking about what they're frustrated about.
Yes.
Dana, so I've seen this thing that was in my CP school, and it's like the purple folder pass. Yeah, it's like on Facebook and everything too, so you like have a note on the purple folder, and that student that's getting frustrated or at their wit's end can just take it around to the teachers, and they'll be like, oh no, this teacher needs it, no, this teacher needs it, and the kid will get so go walk around and get some time to just breathe.
Yes.
There's a school that I know where every classroom in it has like a cool down corner. So every classroom has like, it's this corner where it's like pillows, and they have tissues over there, and then they also have worksheets where on the worksheet it says like, I'm feeling this way because, or, and like the students don't have to write on the worksheet, but you know, lots of times it just helps them to write out their feelings, or I don't know, it's just like easier than telling them to like, oh, go get some water, because you'll constantly just have students in and out. But if they go to this corner in the classroom, they can just sit down and like take a moment, and there's these little things in there for them to like fidget with, and they just spend like 5-10 minutes there, and then they'll come back, and they know when to go there too. It's just a really quick thing, and it's just all done on its own.
Yes.
Yeah. Katie, so I am like a camp counselor over the summer and over winter breaks, and so usually I like to play music when my kids are around. And so I had one kid in particular who had like pretty severe anger issues, and so he would like lose his mind around the other kids, and I would sit him down and be like, all right, you have to sit out like until that song is over. And just kind of would get his mind off of whatever's making him mad, and then he would be listening to the music to like figure out when the song was done, so that he could go back and play it, and it just kind of took him out of it.
Yeah.
Harley. So I've seen something similar to all of these where you do like, it's kind of like an exit ticket type thing where you come in and you kind of sit down and you do this and you like circle which emoji you're feeling right then and there. And then you can kind of describe it to your teacher, or you can write it out like how you're feeling and why you feel that way. And if it's like a bad emotion, anything that can make your day better.
Yeah.
Or if it's happy, like a way to make someone else's day better, something like that.
Yes.
Carly, I also know teachers that have like, they're like cool down cubes, and like on them they have like just little positive notes, and they're just on our desk, they just go grab them and read them and put them back. It's like silly, but to kids it means a lot.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. So, what you said was essentially right. The categories are time management, so maximizing the student engagement, so they're using the time to the best of their ability. Proximity and movement management, clear procedures, and separation of students who cause trouble. Self-monitoring strategies like a checklist. Content enhancements like study guides and advanced organizers. Social skills are problem solving, interpersonal thinking skills that are necessary to avoid and resolve interpersonal conflicts and peer pressure. Conflict resolution, problem solving, and communication, and crisis prevention, which is teaching teachers how to better teach and adapt to those students, and family-centered early interventions.
I'd also like to add.
Yeah. So when some student they ask about in-text citation, this is the right way of in-text citation, except when you are coming from multiple pages, instead of PG, just write PP. So PP meaning multiple pages, or if you put just only P, then it's only one page. Sometimes student they put PG, but for this one, this PP is better than PG. Okay, so this is the perfect way. This is what I want, and then this is what's called PP.
I'd also like to add that I do like y'all talk about the calm down corner. Personally, my mother has that in her SPED classroom. It is a giant teddy bear, one of those that are like this big. If they're angry, they can squeeze his paws. If they're sad, they can wrap his arms around him. And that's something you can do in your classroom, like after Valentine's Day when they sell them for cheap.
Okay, final question, question 3. There are many evidence-based programs implemented in early childhood education for children identified to be at risk for EBD. Throughout the states, however, it is a difficult task for many teachers to fulfill these programs. What are some possible obstacles that influence the effectiveness of these programs? And what are some ways you, as a teacher, can combat these issues?
Harley, I think teacher training for those programs and like that specific area of helping that child would really help. And like, if you don't know how to do it or properly implement it, you're gonna have difficulty making that program effective for the students. So you have to be able to train your teachers, and you have to be able to make sure like that whatever program you're doing is consistent across the school years or school teachers. That's very good.
Carly, going off of that, I think like it's so common for like us to say, well, like school board members say, use this, but if teachers aren't confident in what they're doing and you don't show them that it works, like they're not going to do it. They don't know what to do, and ultimately, all we want to do as teachers is help our kids.
Harley again. So also, I think it's like we have so much as teachers on our plates already about all these other evidence-based programs that we're doing to just teach the content to like the most kids as possible. That way we can say we've done our job for the year, that we're not getting the resources we need to be able to do our job effectively to teach each student. So making sure that teachers have the resources they need, whether it's like a mentor or, you know, more planning time to be able to learn how to do these programs and effectively implement it in their classroom and plan to do these things, that would help.
Very nice. Tana.
Thanks.
Yeah, Tana, so this is something that I've seen a lot of speech therapists do, so not exactly the same, but kind of like in the same realm. So we have this big convention we have this organization called ASHA, and every year there's a convention in Virginia for like the state, and then there's a national one in a different location each year. And what they do is if they have an evidence-based practice that they find that's really working, but that's not being approved in a lot of locations, they'll get lobbyists to come to these conventions, and then they'll inform the lobbyists of what's going on, and then have them go advocate on Capitol Hill. So like, that's a really good way to get them out there to like get the national law changed, so that some of these things can be implemented.
Does anyone else have a comment?
I was just gonna they talked a lot about it already, but they always tell us to implement these programs, or Kayla. But they always tell us to implement these programs, but like you guys said, they don't offer us the proper training to do so, or they tell us to go find it. So I think that information needs to be provided to teachers in order to successfully be able to incorporate that into our classroom.
Carly, I also think like as a future teacher, like just talking about stuff like this is like stressful for us because it's like really discouraging to know that we can be thrown into like, hey, use this, and we don't know what we're doing unless we have like a veteran teacher or like over the summer and like workshops we're told these things. We're not gonna know. And even if you like read about it and learn on your own, you still can do it completely wrong if you read it wrong, and that can really affect a child.
I think also, like, with some of these programs, they're always not always, but they change often, and it's like keeping up with it and keeping up with the trend and the most current information can also be hard, especially like when a bunch of people have said it, like when like we're not being provided the information or the resources to go get the information or the training. It just makes it a lot harder to keep up with the most current needs. Yeah.
Harley again. Also, I think it's kind of an issue because we don't tend to see this as a child that has a disability or an exceptionality. I think we see it as this kid's bad and needs some serious help from someone that's not me. So you have to educate teachers and everyone else in the school that these are issues that need to be identified so they can receive the help they do, instead of just saying, oh, that's a bad kid. Like, I don't want that kid in my class who screams. Something like that.
Also, like, the school board office, everyone's always so worried about SOL scores, benchmark scores. To them, it's more important for them to get a program that's going to help boost our scores than a program that's going to help our kids that need emotional help. Just from my past experience.
Yes, Leslie, I noticed when I was observing a class that they had some that had emotional problems. So the principal called a meeting and the whole group of teachers got together with the nurse and discussed the few children that wanted to know updates, if anything was working, what wasn't working, if there was any other strategies they could figure out to try to help the child. So that sort of helped a lot in order to get them to calm down.
Very good. Does anyone else have a comment about anything? So there are multiple categories on here, but they also interlink with each other. So the first one we're going to talk about is level and type of teacher training. You want to try to attend meetings regularly to receive training on enforcing these programs properly. These trainings will include intervention components in accordance to timing and gauging their effectiveness to the student. No student is the same. Every single time you have a student with EBD and you have to make that specific plan, it's going to be different. The other thing to keep in mind is these are difficult to find if you are in an area that does not signify them. Virginia is typically very good. If you can't find them, I know when you go on the VB.gov site and look under there, they usually list any kind of trainings. These can also count for your recertification because you do have to do a certain amount of meetings. You get points for them to get your recertification after a couple of years. So if you ever need help finding them, there usually is in the VB.gov section a good selection of them going on. The teacher's instruction ability is also a possible obstacle. You want to ensure you adjust your instruction to the best work for the children's needs. While we may get set in our ways and have a specific way we like to teach when we get a little bit further in our careers, we're going to have to change it for every child. It's not going to be you'll have one set way of teaching things. You're going to have that differentiation and all of the universal design of learning included in your plan. And it's especially helpful when you have a student with emotional and behavioral disorders. You want to change the setting as well if necessary, and the activities as well are really helpful to be appropriate for the child's needs. Another thing that affects it is the quality of teacher-child relationships. Raise your hand if you had a teacher who you absolutely hated. What if you had that teacher for 3 years in a row? Some school systems, you have the same teacher for 3 years in a row. And if you have that bad relationship and you are suffering from an emotional behavioral disorder, you are going to have a hard time being successful. It is important. I know it's extremely frustrating trying to make these bridges with some children, but it's really important. You may absolutely despise the child, but at the end of the year, they can come up and be like, "You're my favorite. You helped me along so much." And knowing that you've done that will be really helpful for you, as well as a major difference for that child. You want to try and keep a positive attitude, and even though it is going to be frustrating, always try to find the positives. A good way to do this is saying, "I like how you" statements. So instead of pointing out how they didn't do something that they were supposed to, be like, "I like how you followed this direction." And we can try and do that with the next direction as well. Individual teacher characteristics, and that's talking about experience and licensure. As a teacher, you need to grow with your students and take as many opportunities to improve as yourself for your students. If you find your administration is not offering these, usually if you put in writing that you have this need and that you need to have it, they will have to start accommodating you and accommodating the child. Once it is made vocal, they need to start making that accommodations as found in our other litigations and legislations. The other thing is child characteristics. You never know what risk factors, level, or type of behavior issues they may have. You want to be ready for anything and keep an open mind. Always ask for support from your fellow teachers. Almost every teacher will have some kind of guidance to give you about how to address this child and their needs. Consider the fact that you don't know what they go through. I want to end this part of it with personal experience. I had a child in my class I volunteered with in 4th grade. He was not, to my knowledge, diagnosed. I'm not allowed to know that. But he displayed all of the characteristics, and the teacher pushed it off and said it was not a big deal and that he was just seeking attention. Ended up talking to me one day because I had peanut butter and he loved peanut butter. Ended up opening up to me and talking to me and told me that he was trying to kill himself. Nobody in the school knew. And it wasn't until he told me that he was able to get the help he needed. Like that, trying to keep that positive attitude even when you don't like kids at direction and what they're doing can majorly change their life. That child was homeless. He had been jumping around for 6 months. They were just trying to keep him in the school system. And right after he was helped with his suicide attempts, he actually ended up losing his mother. And without that system, I don't know where he would be today. So it's really important. This usually goes under the rug. People don't tend to put a focus on this, but it is a really important disorder and disability to focus on.
Thank you very much.